everybody. Welcome to Life Together. Today we're having conversation about finding the church that's right for you. We have today Marcus, our senior leader, Brittany, and myself. I'm Teresa. And we all kind of have a different church story. You have an international church story. I have a local church story. And you have a new church story. So it'll be interesting to hear the different perspectives. So I actually was reading an article about churchgoers in America, and 23% of people who consider themselves Christians aren't going to church regularly because they feel like they haven't found the church that's right for them. So it's this whole piece of like, how do I find the church that's right for me? If I'm in a church, is it the church that's right for me? Because we all want to know that we're planted in the place where we really belong, that God wants us to be. So we're going to talk about some of these questions. How do I know that I'm in the place where God wants me to be? What do I do if I'm having questions about that? So we're going to talk about some of those things. If somebody doesn't have a church that they belong to, how would they begin the journey of finding a church that is good for them? If they're like, you know what, I'm not going to church, but I know I'd really like to. What would be a place where they could start?
Google.
Seriously. Google, like the internet, we have
Yellow
so
Pages.
many tools.
What's Yellow
online.
Pages?
We do have so many tools online now that we can actually start there. I don't think that you should just base it off of Google by any means, but you can start finding at least local churches where you can start investigating.
Or if you have friends that go to church and you ask them a little bit about the church and that kind of stuff, you get opinions from that, you know. Or when you're driving by, you see, hey, tons of people go over here. Let me see what this is about.
Yeah.
And just experiment. Don't give yourself, I have to go. Just go in. If you don't like it, walk
Try
back
it out.
Yeah, it's like a store. Go in and go out.
So let's talk about how we found our churches. My parents found my first two churches that I went to for me. And then God found this church for me. I kind of I didn't even know I was picking this church. So I never was in that real position where I was like in a new place, have to find a new church. But were you in that place where you kind of had to start fresh in a new church?
I've been there many times. But, you know, I remember being in Germany when I had just gotten there, and I had no idea what church to go to. I had just come from South America into Germany, and I'm like, I have no clue where to go. And I didn't know how I got to the one church that I went to. I can't remember what the reason was why I went there. But I went, and I remember my dad saying, you know, at least go to church, because it's something that if you don't go to church, you're going to eventually, you know, spiritually, you're going to die. And because you just have your own input. And he used the word, it's spiritual incest, not going to church, because you're constantly just listening to your own rhetorical, whatever things.
Yeah.
And you eventually become your own system. And so I just, you know, being a young 21-year-old, when I went to Europe for the first time, that was a ride, you know, total culture shock, totally everything, but I went to church, and nobody said hi for me the first year, and I'm like, why am I going here? And that was tough, and that was rough, but I still went, you know, because I felt like I owe it to the Lord to go to a place of worship together, because the Bible talks about don't forsake the gathering of the brethren. So I went, even though it was tough, you know. And I think a lot of it was my issues too, not just the people in the church, because I think they all love the Lord and stuff, but it was my thing. I had culture shock. I had a lot of issues. Sometimes when you're young, you blame everybody else. You want everybody else doing some things for you, and that just wasn't happening.
Yeah. So Brittany, for you, like you found our church, Word Life Center.
Mm-hmm. On Google.
On Google. So what do we do? I'm sure there's a lot of stuff about our church that you like, but was there certain things in our church that you felt like my needs aren't being met, or certain things that you felt like, I wish there would be more of this, how did you navigate through those kind of times?
Yeah, so definitely, this is the first church I really went to. I got saved here, so I was navigating just not only finding a new church, but finding my first church too. But there was a huge need of people my age that was not here when I came here. And so I can remember actually talking to you about it and saying, I don't think this is the church for me. There's no one my age. I think I should go to a church with people my age. And so the first thing I did was tell someone about it and actually talk about the need that I didn't feel like it was being met. And then the second thing that did was that, well, one, made me just feel better because I wasn't keeping it in anymore. It wasn't like the secret. And then you kind of came alongside me and walked me through it, which was really helpful because you said, okay, well, let's see if this is something that, maybe this is the church for you or maybe it's not, but let's walk it through together. And so we walked it through, and little by little, I started to see that actually what I was seeing wasn't even true. There were people my age, but for some reason I was blocked off from seeing
Oh, wow.
it. And because they weren't like exactly my age,
Okay.
and like, you're a couple years younger, a couple years older, so it was silly. But just really being honest and open and letting someone in to walk through that with me and seeing that actually my needs were here, they were being met, just not how I thought they should be. And so really just being trusting in God and letting others into that process.
So you kind of just hung in there and said, let's see how this works out, instead of just jumping ship right away.
Right.
Let's check this out and see if this can work. Yeah, good. What are some things that would be important for people? We know, like, we're all coming from different backgrounds and different places, but what are things that we would say, hey, these are things that are important to look for in a church?
Well, it just depends on what needs you personally have. I think it's a style too. Certain styles are there. If you have certain styles that you want to do, I think number one, I think there's always an important part of finding out where is it that God wants you, right? I think that's always there's a religious question. Where does God want me? And I need to make sure I find that place. I think that's true, but it's not as legalistic as it looks like. So I think you just go to places and find out where you want to be. And I've been in all sorts of churches, all different denominations, because I've been there because I know God wanted me there. It wasn't I have to be at the one only place, right? And I think sometimes you come to a place of worship because you're learning something. Because we're all brothers and sisters. So denomination, I don't believe in that anyway, denominationalism. So I can be in any church where God puts me and be there because I'm a light. I've actually had people who were, Protestants from Foursquare movement, where I went to a Bible school with. They literally became Catholic priests because God told them, I need you to be a light in the Catholic church. And he became a Catholic priest, and he is an amazing light in the Catholic church.
Wow.
Because that's what he does.
Yeah.
So I'm not advocating it for everybody. God says those things. So I think it's part of, we have to get away from that. If I'm a certain denomination, I always look for this denomination. That's not really how I believe, because the kingdom is not denomination. The kingdom is a tribe. It's a family. And I feel like you have to find your place where you feel like, I connect here. And you maybe when you make that decision, you connect here. Maybe in 2 months you go, I don't connect here anymore. But that is probably not because something changed in the church. It's probably something changed in you because now things are stepping on your toes. And that's most people. That happens after 7 months. The average in America, 7 months to 9 months, people change churches. That's what they do. And so because when it gets too close or when somebody hurt me, I'm going to go somewhere else. And so that's the thing that you have to avoid that has nothing to do with God, has everything to do with yourself. So you have to be transparent and honest with yourself and look at that.
Right. Like in our church, which when I started coming to our church about 26 years ago, this is a church so nice to me. Like everybody's so kind, so loving. But I found myself like a couple years later sitting there and feeling like I don't belong here. They don't want me here. Like I could literally feel this wound in my heart screaming, nobody wants you here. You don't belong here. You're not loved here. And I was like, I know it wasn't anybody else's fault. So I had to literally be intentional and figure out why is it that I feel like I don't belong here? What lies am I believing about myself? And actually bring God and have encounters with God to heal me because it was feeling like uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I remember even when I worked in different churches, in the beginning you're like all like, oh yeah, this is great vision, great everything. As soon as you get hurt, you go, that's a stupid vision. I don't even want to do this vision. What the heck is that about? And you go, that's stupid. I'm not even that. I just did it because of you. And you just become blamer, and instead of looking at yourself and go, wait a minute, I shouldn't even have this attitude. If I would be really about God's business, maybe this is no longer for me, but I should never talk negative about what they're doing. And the
Yeah.
way I actually talk about it is a real root issue about me. It's not about what's going on.
Yeah. That's like really good. What do you any thoughts you're having, Brittany?
Just something that Marcus just said. Like, I can remember, I've shared this before about my hug testimony when I came in. Like,
Yeah.
I made a comment, like, if anyone hugs me, I'm leaving. And then that day, you taught on if there's a problem with hugging, that's a problem with you. And that's something that I really always kind of go back to. Like, okay, God obviously has something for me here. It doesn't matter what anyone else does. It doesn't matter what anyone else says. I know that God had me there in that moment. And so until that changes, until God, yeah, like, it doesn't matter if somebody hurts me and stuff. I don't like it. I don't always react the best way, but I know that this is the church for me because God has given me so many of those little things. There's been many since then too. That just is like, yes, this is where you're supposed to be. This touches on this, and I just have that. And so, like you were saying, like when things happen, like that's what I go back to, those little testimonies, and just like, nope, God said this, and I'm here until God says something different.
And you have to really understand, what does it mean, is this my church? What does that look like? I mean, if you just come on Sundays and leave on Sundays and this is your church, that's just what you do as a tradition. And if you come and do this and you're working with people, passionate people, powerful people, you're going to get hurt. That doesn't mean it's not your church. There's going to be misunderstanding. There's going to be problems. Why? Because you're working together. Anytime two people work together, there's going to be issues.
Yeah.
So either you're this person that you sits in the back pew and just goes, yeah, well, this is my church. I've come here for 10 years. And then suddenly you hear one sermon that you like, or somebody doesn't greet you, or somebody says, well, I'm out of here. Well, then that's fine. But you're going to have to figure out more than that. What is my church? This means, actually for me, it means, I'm supposed to be here because I have a puzzle, because I have something to
Yes.
contribute. I am powerful in this church because I have something, God has me to contribute. And that contribution doesn't have to always be teaching, preaching, and doing this. Something is just me being here as an encourager, me being here as an intercessor, me being here as a servant, me being as a lot of many different things. And that's why I'm here. And it's not about what's my church. I'm a part of this kingdom right now, right here, because I live here. I think a big part for me is, if you live in the community, you want to go into a church where your community is, because that's where you can invite the people. That's where you can connect with, right? If you drive for an hour, 2 hours to go to a church, I mean, it's awesome, good church, but how are you going to be invested?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I go to church because I want to serve there, not because of what I can get. If I go to church because of what I can get, yeah, that's tough.
Yeah. So when we come back, we're going to talk about that, because there's so many glorious, wonderful churches out there, tens of thousands of churches, and there's a church that God has a beautiful place for you to fit in, and a place for you to give who you are. So when we come back, we're going to talk more about that. So we're back with Life Together. We're talking about how do we know which church is for us, and how to really get involved and be a part of church life. So one thing that I know often comes up in church life is, what if I don't agree with everything that the church I'm going to believes? Is that a problem? And how do I navigate through different opinions with the church that I might be going to?
Well, I think it's a good thing, because it just shows your immaturity or maturity, one or the other. If I don't agree with everything, maybe I have to grow. And if I don't agree with everything, maybe I have to be patient and kind. I mean, not everybody's going to agree with everything. Nobody has all the answers to the Bible.
Right.
So nobody has.
Finding
everybody's
ways to communicate.
experimenting some of the stuff with the scripture, not. I mean, obviously, if there's heresy being preached, there's no God, and that's probably not a good church to be a part of. But you have a lot of, different thoughts and processes people are walking through, and, you don't have to. Somebody says, well, I feel like we have to help the rich, or the other ones, we have to help the poor. I believe in the gifts of Spirit. I don't believe in the gifts of Spirit. I believe in tongues. I don't believe in tongues. there are so many peripherals that find something that fits most to where you can live and work with, and major on the majors, don't major on the minors.
Is there a way to communicate? So what's our ways to communicate if there is something that we're feeling tension about? Because they actually say the number one reason people leave a church is because they feel like they have a different opinion. And that makes people feel, that tends to make us as humans feel really uncomfortable. So what is a way that we can talk and communicate and kind of get peace with something that's kind of bugging us, and so it doesn't feel like it's bugging me anymore?
Well, I think the bottom part is if something's bugging you, if you don't talk about it, that's your problem. You know, I mean, either if you're willing to change and you're willing to grow and you're teachable, you will ask questions. And you won't blame, and you won't condemn, and you won't judge. So the biggest problem
So
for us is
questions.
to come and to say, hey, you know what? I don't understand. What is it that, for example, why do you guys pray for people? Well, let me tell you. And then you tell them. Or why do you prophesy? You know, what is that? I don't understand that. Or why do you declare? Or who knows? Why do you have, music this way? Why do you have drums? Who knows? You know, why didn't you? There's many whys. Ask questions, and then you don't have to agree with the answer that was given, but at least bring it out there and process with people, and give yourself some time to process through things. Don't let one conversation be the end of conversation, but let maybe a couple of weeks go by in this conversation, in this process. Get to know the people, get to understand. The biggest thing is to get to know the definition of what they're saying, not your language, but ask what are they meaning? What are the words actually meaning? Because sometimes I come from a background, this means this,
Yeah.
and this means this, you know. So let's identify, okay, the Old Testament word of prophet is, okay, if you said something that didn't come true, you're going to be stoned. Well, what is your definition? What's the biblical definition of it? What's our culture definition? Or what have we been taught? You know, what denomination?
Yeah.
So all these definitions have to come to a medium, so we have to find that.
Like especially in our culture,
Yeah.
because we're more embracing supernatural, prophetic. We're really embracing that bringing heaven to earth. And so it feels new to a lot of people, even to people who've been coming to our church for a long time. So it's really good that we make people feel invited to ask questions. Is that something that you ever kind of came across, like, oh, I have a lot of questions, and having to ask questions to understand things?
I mean, I had a ton of questions because I didn't just have questions of, small changes. I had questions of everything because I had no grid for the
Everything was
Bible.
new.
I had no grid for anything that we were talking about. So I asked tons of questions.
Did it feel scary?
Certain questions felt scarier than others just because of like what I was used to in my home life, like being able to ask and questions. So certain ones felt scary, and I would kind of save them for later. And the more I built up trust with the people around me, the more comfortable I felt asking certain questions. But yeah, I just kind of started with small questions, like what does this word mean in the Bible? Who is this person in the Bible? And then worked my way up. When I built connections with my small questions, is what worked the best for me. But yeah, definitely I asked a ton of questions. I still ask a lot of questions. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really good, because that brings everybody to a feeling of, you know what, I'm okay to be here. Because if we don't ask, it makes us feel really anxious, and makes us feel really uncomfortable, like it's not okay to be here. What are some ways that we can build connections in church if we feel like people are not being really friendly to me as I wish they were? What's a way we can build connections? Because that's sometimes a struggle we can feel. I know you said that with the church that you went to in Europe, that you felt like people weren't friendly. How did you do anything to break down the walls?
Well, I think one thing is big is that usually you go in and out, right? You go into church, you sit in the back row, and then you go, okay, nobody talked to me, I'm going out, or nobody said hi to me, I'm going out. And that's really what in my case it was. I would sit in the back, or I'd sit somewhere in the end, and we had service and stuff, and then I'd sit around a little bit, and then since nobody, and imagine this, you're sitting and you're not looking inviting, you're not looking like you're looking like freaked out of your mind or whatever else. So people are not going to want to come and talk to you. If they're not really mature, they're not going to come and say hi to you. And it was usually the pastor would come and say hi, and some other people, but that was not my generation, and so my young people didn't say hi to me, that kind of stuff, and you're like, oh yeah, So these are the things that you have to recognize. A lot of times we come across, don't talk to me. we come across really short. We come across defensive. So I think a lot of times what we have to recognize too is what can I do? And what I did is I just figured out there was a cafe that the youth there had a cafe. And I go, you know what, I'm just going to go. I'm just going to. So I went, and a lot of my generation was there, and they go, hey, I see you in church. And I'm like, well, great, you see that now after a year, So, and that's what actually that night everything changed, because they started talking to me, and that changed everything. But it took a year for me to just sit there because I just was persistent about it. But I think it's just changed because I changed something. I think it's always interesting to say everybody else, whatever issues they have, a lot of times it's also the vibes that I give out.
Yeah. Yeah. Because other people, they have their insecurities too. And so it's
and if they're not mature, like the mature people, the older people,
they don't care. Yeah, they don't care. They'll be like, tough guy,
some grandma comes, but you don't want to talk to the grandma. You want to talk to the young people, to the young whatever, and they're not coming because they feel like you look weird, you look closed, you look defensive. I don't even know where you come from. You talk weird. Get out of here, and you're like, okay, you're weird too. And then, it's not good.
Yeah. And you touched on something earlier about the way we really feel a part of things in our church is when we really believe that we have something that we're giving, that we're something that we're bringing. And when we walk in the door, I feel like that moment that we walk in the door of church is like so important because it can be that you walk in the door feeling scared and anxious. And do I belong here? Does anybody care about me? I'm not as good as everybody else. They're all doing this and they're doing worship and they're preaching and they're greeting people and I really don't have anything to give. And that can feel really lonely. That can feel really like a lot of anxiety. And I imagine that maybe still a lot of people feel that way when they walk into church. So what we've been talking about is building identity so that when you walk into church, you know what, I'm walking into church, I know who I am, and I know what I'm bringing to this place, whether I'm literally involved or not, but I walk into this door saying, I bring peace, I bring a joyful smile, I bring a joyful hug. So like, how important is that? Do you have memories of like what it was like to walk in the door and not feel like you had something to bring?
Definitely. I think I shared on the other episode that I did that it took me like probably at least a year to walk into the church by myself. I wouldn't even come in the door by myself because I was just like, I did not feel comfortable. I did not own who Brittany was enough to even come by myself. So yeah, that took at least a year for that part to come through. And still, like even with that, I still sometimes have struggle, okay, like what is valuable? And for me, past hurt of performance likes to creep in. So if I'm not doing something actively, I sometimes still struggle with my value. So I have to be really careful about that. Like, okay, what am I feeling right now? Because I can easily get caught up in that. But I definitely have come a long way where I can walk into the door by myself, and I'm still working on being able to intentionally go up to people and say hi, and knowing that just me being there is totally valuable. And it's so funny because I can see it in other people now. Like, I miss them when they're not there. It doesn't matter if they're cooking or preaching or on worship team. Like, just them being there, it's like, oh, they're missing. And so I see it in other people and still really like 100% owning it. For me, I'm still walking through, but definitely I can remember not even wanting to come into the church by myself,
But isn't that a great feeling to find a church, find your home church where you're like, I know I'm important here. Yeah. I know I belong here and I'm missed. If I'm not walking in the doors, a ton of people are going to be like, where's Brittany?
But I think part of the belonging also is how much are you willing to invest?
Yeah.
Where your treasure is, there's going to be your heart. And the question is, where's your treasure? Is your treasure in the Lord, obviously, but is it where you invest? People are going to recognize you. And if you just come for time just to receive and to eat and to get, and you never ever want to invest, it's going to be really tough for you to feel this is my place. If you show no investment, this is not your place. It's going to be a comfort zone until somebody crosses you or some hurt has been touched on, and then you're just going to go off and move again. So those are the things that I think if you really invest in some place because this is yours, you're going to feel this is mine. I mean, moving an apartment doesn't feel yours until you decorate it. And once you decorate it, it's like, this is
The
mine
truth.
now. Right?
Yep.
You can buy a new car, it won't feel like yours until you put whatever in there. You know?
Hamburger.
Hamburger. you know,
So you eat a
whatever is
hamburger in
involved, whatever you do, but somehow after a while it becomes you because you have memories in it.
Yeah.
And that's a key thing after a while. It does not happen instantly. Like I said, it took for me like a year and a half easily for me to start feeling comfortable. And so it's not something that's instant. And I know, at least with especially like the millennial generation, we're very used to things happening fast. So for it to not happen fast and my feelings not to change right away and still having to say, no, I'm still trying, like holding on to, God put me here. I know he put me there. He confirmed that with that first message, going back to that for me and just walking through that. And it's okay that I don't feel this way and it's still a year later, but just really owning, what does God say? What does God say? Why does God have me here?
Right.
Yeah, and then journaling that down too, so you know that he had said it. But so many people come to and the first time they hear, they go, "Oh my gosh, this is the best church. You guys are so loving. You're so amazing. You're so awesome." And then they stay 2 weeks until, because they came with a hurt and you fed that hurt, and that because you fed that hurt, they're just saying this is the most awesome thing. If you're famished and you're not eating, I don't care if they give you a French fry, you think it's the best food. It's not gourmet. It's just the best food, right? But once you're full again, that no longer becomes appetizing. And you're going to find a lot of people who will come to church and go, "Oh my gosh, it's the best thing. The worship was awesome, or the sermon was awesome, or the people were awesome, or the facilities are awesome, or the PowerPoint was awesome." Something was great. And once that need is satisfied, they no longer feel this is good. And you won't see them again because they have to feed something else. And that's not what you're looking at in a church. You're not looking at what actually feeds me. You're looking at, what is it that I can contribute in this place? Is there a contribution that I can give to this place? And that is not figured out the first Sunday you're there. That's figured out probably in a couple months. And so if you start going to a place, you go, "God, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to look at this." Ask a lot of questions. The people who, what do you want to find your church?
Yeah.
Go to church, spend there 3 months. That means, 12 weeks, 6 to 12 weeks. Spend a lot of time asking questions. And as you ask questions, as you process that, and any church should be totally welcoming you and saying, "Here, listen, I'm trying to find my tribe, and I'm just trying to find if that's you guys. Would you guys, I want to ask questions, be a part of every single thing that they do, and find out if something connects in you." Go, "Yes, I can do that." And if it's not, go around and say goodbye to every single one of them. "I'm going to go find something else because I don't feel like this is mine." And everybody's going to be happy because we want you only at the place where God wants you.
Yeah. There's going to be a confirmation.
Yes,
Feeling
there's
like,
going to be a total
like at
confirmation.
Word
Yeah.
Life Center, there was such, even though I wasn't all the way integrated, there was such a confirmation in my spirit, like, this is my family. And then after that, it was the journey of really getting plugged in and really all in.
Yeah,
But
and
it's
at
like,
that point, then it gets hard.
That's the word.
Then it gets hard because now it's working with people. Now you're gonna get hurt. Now you're gonna, But that's kingdom. You're gonna, and nobody's gonna hurt you on purpose. Some people will do. You have to forgive them anyway. But then it's gonna be like, okay, this is gonna be good because that's how communication happens. That's how you start working. That's because you're being in conflict. You're gonna get closer and closer and closer and closer and closer because you're gonna do battle against the enemy together. And he's
Yeah.
going to try to outplay you. You say, "No, we're not. We're going together."
there's going to be a lot of those hard times, but
Absolutely.
at the end of the day, it's the greatest thing ever.
Yep.
Tell me why it's the greatest thing ever, Brittany.
For me, I've shared this before. Like, I have a full family here because my family was all over the place. I have grandmas, I have moms, I have dads, I have brothers and sisters. I'm an only child, so brothers and sisters are great. Like, I just have so much that, like, I get to actually, now I'm in the stage where I can learn how to give back. At first, it was a lot of me learning because it was all new to me, but now it's like, oh yes, I can help the kids who are younger than me. I can do this. I can give back. I can be on the show and let you interview me and say, yes, you're not alone in feeling this way. So,
Yeah.
it's just great.
It is the best ever.
Yep.
Like getting to work together, even though there's, through all the struggle, whatever, it's the best thing ever.
Yeah.
To find yourself fully alive in an environment where who you are is needed and appreciated, and you can see that what you yourself carry is actually pushing the kingdom forward.
Absolutely.
Best thing ever.
Yep.
All right, thank you. Marcus, thanks, Brittany,
You're
for
welcome.
being here. Everybody, thanks for being here on this episode, and see you next time on Life Together.